Good evening, I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with The Mojo Story, our independent digital platform that does a deep dive into the big issues of the day. On the broadcast this evening, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi speaking at Brown University in the United States of America. An online interaction has reignited the democracy debate that has been in the headlines after two international groups downgraded India's democratic status. But Rahul Gandhi has now waded in to that political conversation, basically drawing analogies with Saddam Hussein and Libya's Muammar Gaddafi. These are comments that could be called plain speak if you agree with him, but if you don't, or if you're an observer of Indian politics, you could say that he has shown a poor political instinct. That's the question we'll be asking on the program today. Which way is it? But before that, take a look at what Rahul Gandhi said in response to a question from Professor Ashutosh Varshney at Brown University.
You cannot separate electoral democracy from institutional frameworks, right? An election is not simply people going and pressing a button on a voting machine. An election is about narrative. An election is about institutions that make sure that the framework in the country is operating properly. Election is about a judiciary that is being fair. Election is about a debate that is taking place in parliament, right? So you need those things for the vote to count. You know, Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi used to have elections. They used to win them. They were actually voting. It wasn't that they weren't voting, but there was no institutional framework to protect that vote. So to me, India is going to find out that it's actually much further down the curve than it thinks and that outsiders think.
All right, so that analogy being drawn with Saddam and Gaddafi, with Iraq and Libya, what do we make of those parallels? Let's first introduce our guests on the program today. Let's bring them up one by one. We have Dr. Ajoy Kumar, leader of the Congress Party, joining us. We have Gurcharan, author, economist, and has, of course, been in corporate India as well, man of many hats, joining us. Sushant Sareen, policy analyst with the Observer Research Foundation, is with us. Irfan Habib, historian and commentator, is with us. Dr. Shruti Kapila, professor at Cambridge University, is with us. So a really interesting panel here. And before I get the Congress response, I actually want to start with you, Gurcharan, if I may. The point is that those who defend Rahul Gandhi would say he was not being literal. He's not saying Prime Minister Modi is Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi. He was making a larger philosophical point, the distinction between elections, electoral democracy, and institutional autonomy. But those who don't support him will say Rahul Gandhi has put his foot in it yet again. Which one do you think?
Well, I think he was talking overall about democracy. I don't think he was talking about living under Saddam or under Gaddafi. I mean, I haven't lived under either, but my friends have, and they would say that India is different from living under either Saddam or Gaddafi. But I think the question really is that we are living in an illiberal democracy. And this is something that 25 years ago, Fareed Zakaria wrote a book about illiberal democracies. And frankly, I feel since for 70 years, the Indian citizens' relationship with the state is defined by two Hindustani words. One is rishwat and the other is sifarish. Boy, if you don't have those two, you have no chance. And it is true even today. Now, what is a liberal democracy? It has three pillars, in my view. One, it has an effective executive who can get things done. And in India, we have seen executives who were more effective, less effective, and so on. And the second pillar is that action of the executive should be under the rule of law. Nobody is above the rule of law. And the third pillar is accountability to the people. And that's the election bit or the ongoing state. Now, what matters to me is that the institutions of the state how they, because that's how this gets translated.
But if I
How
may
they affect
interject,
our citizen. And can I just finish? The point here is that in a country where it takes 10 years to get justice in the court for a common citizen, to get an FIR put into a police station takes a bribe. And for an executive, in the executive, where a civil servant who is very effective, works 14 hours a day, gets promoted on the same day as a guy who works 2 hours a day. And in parliament, the other institution, 25% to 30% have parliamentarians have a criminal record. And half of these crimes are serious crimes. And finally, in parliament, we have dynasties. And dynasties are offensive to me in a democracy. So that's why this is why I feel we are still...
Hang on, Gurcharan. You made it. Okay, so 1 minute. Let me just take your last point first. If you said dynasties are offensive to you in a democracy, and some might say that the Gandhis actually represent that, right? In many ways, that's the first point. The second point is the kind of weaknesses in the Indian democratic system that you're actually talking about have existed. You seem to suggest for time immemorial, whereas I think Rahul Gandhi was making the point that there is a depletion of democracy. There is a depletion of democracy in his suggestion being now in the post sort of Modi India. Do you agree with that part of it, or are you making a rather eternal point about India's democracy?
Well, I am making an eternal point, and I wrote a book called India Grows at Night When the Government Sleeps. And that is, but I think what Rahul Gandhi talks about, there is one important point there. The change is that if I were a Muslim today in India, I would feel less secure. And if that's what he's talking about, I think he's correct.
Okay, so a lot of different points there. One, that the institutional weaknesses that you have pointed to, you say have existed, always, and during the Congress era as well. You have a problem with dynasty, but you do feel that the social fabric in terms of religion, that has been hit. I just want to bring in Sushant before I bring in the Congress view. So Sushant, let me now bring you into the conversation. And I know as I ask you this question that, I was reading in the Hindustan Times that the government is actually mulling an Indian think tank rating the world's democracies, an Indian think tank rating press freedoms across the world. And there is a kind of bristling at the Western world doing a dipstick test of India's democracy. But is that the mature response, or do we have to look in? That's the first question. The second question is, of course, a political question. I'm not convinced that Rahul's comments, true or untrue, actually help him politically.
Okay, so Barkha, on the first one, I think it's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction. It's the kind of reaction which comes when you have these kind of gratuitous remarks coming from the rest of the world. It is nobody's case that India's democracy is not flawed. But please show me one perfect democracy of a large enough country, a diverse enough country like India in the world. Now, maybe you can say Denmark, because now they've banned funding for mosques from abroad, is becoming an illiberal democracy. Maybe you can say the US has always been an illiberal democracy in many ways. You can say the same thing for any number of Western or European countries. And you would be right saying that. So there is no one perfect democracy, neither is India. But we are getting there. Mr. Gurcharan Das, I'm a big fan of his, but I have to join issue with him. He talks about illiberal democracy. This illiberal democracy in India come after 2014. All the things which he has said have existed since time immemorial. I am 50 years old. I have seen it ever since I have been born. So suddenly the world has discovered that India is an illiberal democracy. You have much freer and fairer elections today than you have ever had in the past. You have a judiciary which is far more assertive in many ways. Now, if the judiciary passes a law or passes a judgment which you don't agree with, you say that this is a sold out judiciary. If the judiciary passes a judgment which is in your favor, you say the judiciary is alive and kicking. But what was the judiciary during Mrs. Gandhi's time or during the Congress regime? So listen, I think, we also have this habit that because we are not in power anymore, everything which happens in this country is wrong. Now, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, on the political question, had he been in Saddam's Iraq or Castro's Cuba or Gaddafi's Libya, incidentally, all leaders who were great friends of his family, he would not have dared to say what he said today. Those were the kind of democracies. They might have held elections, but I don't know what the opposition was in those countries. In India, you have an opposition which is alive and kicking. Okay, there is an element of pathos about a dynasty in decline. There is an element of pathos about an empire which is crumbling. But that, so be it. And I don't have any problem with dynasties and democracies, because ultimately people either vote them in or vote them out. So people were voting in Mrs. Gandhi, people are not voting Rahul Gandhi, and the Congress needs to fix that. And if the Congress leadership is going to act like an internet troll, then I'm afraid, they've lost the plot. The other problem is that Mr. Gandhi, at a time when, you are in the midst of a very important election in at least 4 important states and 1 union territory, and you have, who is he addressing? Brown University. Again, you have these Darbari academics from abroad who find relevance in India because nobody listens to them where they are placed.
Why judge the academics, right? It is
Rahul because they are the ones who are
to have that engagement or not have it. We're having this conversation on a day when one of our best known academics has resigned from one of our best universities, Ashoka University, in a fog. We don't know what's happened. I agree with the part where you say, why is he talking to academia instead of being out on the election trail? That part I agree with. But why are we judging the academics?
No, I'm not judging. I'm judging the academics who find relevance out here because nobody listens to them where they are. And the only thing they can do is they try and apple polish Mr. Gandhi's, his brand value by making him talk to people in Brown University. I don't know, maybe there are 50 or 100 or 200 students in Brown University. Is that the constituency he wants to address? And by dissing his own country, by saying it's not a democracy anymore. It was a democracy when his party was in power, but it's not a democracy when another party is in power and he can't dislodge them. Or his narrative finds no takers, or his own party is imploding. So I think, it's basically a dynasty in decline, an empire which is crumbling, and they really need to get their act together. Nobody would be happier than me to have a strong centrist opposition party in this country to talk about issues which are relevant to this country, but not, indulge in this kind of wokeism and this kind of, trying to bring in this woke philosophies into India's rough and tumble of India's politics. It's not going to work. If that is his template for becoming politically relevant and recovering lost political ground, then God help the Congress party. But to say that everything in India has gone to the dust, of course there is a problems. Of course there have always been problems in this country, and not just with Muslims. It's also been there with other communities. And that has been a problem. We need to fix that, but we are not going to fix that by behaving like an internet troll. I'm afraid. I think the Congress party is losing the plot.
Okay, very, very passionately argued there, and I want to pick up. I want to actually pick up parts of it, and I think the most important part to pick up is in election season. Is this actually what Rahul Gandhi should be doing at all? And that's the political question. But there is also a point to be asked about the very content of these reports, right, Ajoy? Let's bring in Ajoy Kumar now. Ajoy, the report that actually called India an electoral autocracy actually equates us with Pakistan. Right? It says that we're as autocratic as Pakistan. Now, I have to say that, for all the concerns that well-meaning citizens we may have, that for Rahul Gandhi to support a report like that, I think is not just politically counterintuitive, it's just plain wrong. I mean, that is a country that is run by its military by remote control. There is no comparison. For all the warts, all the gaps in our democracy, Ajoy, there can be no comparison with Pakistan. Ajoy, you're on mute. Please unmute yourself before you speak. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So Barkha, first of all, when academics like Sushant start speaking in the language of of a troll, I would say, because for the simple reason being I'm disappointed with the kind of the way the discussion, at least from somebody like, and I've been on very often on the other side of Sushant, and he's been very well, he's decent in communication, but the kind of words we use for each other, unfortunate. At least I would have thought, my political opponents speak and are very used to speaking that kind of words, but academicians, I don't think so. But anyway, and I do respect Sushant's view, so I want to put that up front. But the question again is, Rahul Gandhi didn't write that report. He didn't write, and the same report of Freedom House has even downgraded the United States. Why are we this, hyper allergic? He didn't write the V Dem report. He didn't write the other report, and it's a report which scored so many other countries. It scored everybody else. The issue again is, he just said, and why he raised this question is because a lot of people are raising these questions. A lot of people are raising this question. Why is the fair election commission is what Sushant said. Let's start with that. The most shameful thing is anonymity in electoral bonds. And you say that it is fair. You don't know which businessman is giving which money, and then you say it's not.
You all voted for that. No, you were in parliament voting for foreign
Nobody can vote for that. Nobody for no one side.
Joy, there have been only two things on which parliament has been unanimous.
One side.
You voted on foreign contributions on the same side as the BJP.
One side. So can I, Barkha, you asked me a question, let me complete.
Yes.
Election commission fairness. We are just one aspect is the funding aspect. The other aspect is the political funding of parties or not. There is no limit to it. So we joke ourselves, and whether it's Congress or BJP, we are talking about flawed democracies. So when you talk about 70 lakhs limit for the members of parliament, and there is no limit to the expenditure of the political parties, Congress or BJP or CPIM or TMC, the democracy gets subverted. We are talking about right now what the report has said. The second issue which you are coming to is in terms of even the institutions and the capture and what Mr. Gandhi was mentioning. Other institutions, now every time you will go back and say, Mrs. Gandhi was a mistake, it wasn't a mistake. Were we bad at that time? We have a lot of things to be proud of and a lot of things to be ashamed of. And there's no debate on that issue. But in 2014, Barkha, if you're looking at 2014 to 2019, in the modern era, are we looking at issues which concern us? Yes. And are those questions for the V Dem report or Freedom House reports relevant to us? Yes. Is the judiciary under a lot of pressure? Yes. Is the election commission having people on extension and income tax coming? The CBDT chairman continuously getting 3 to 4 extensions. The NI and the CBI and everybody else going bonkers. Did they go earlier crazy? Yes, they went crazy earlier. But are they crazy right now? Yes, they are crazy right now. So the question again is, like Gurcharan Mr. Gurcharan Das correctly said that if we are today saying, look at the media now, the institutional capture of the mainstream media, is that a truth? Are the voices of different sections of society being heard? No. The issues which are critically important for this country never get covered. So I'm just saying, like it or not, the major media is setting the agenda. Now, if you are saying that the media or the mainstream media in India is independent, but the color coding of the journalists didn't happen earlier, didn't happen, emergency was a bad situation, yeah, we are not denying it. But 2021, Barkha sitting there, if any reasonably intelligent guy, even the rabid BJP supporter, if you pull him out, will say, so those challenges are there. And Mr. Gandhi was not saying Saddam.
Yeah, Ajoy, just to briefly get in Gurcharan and then to bring in Dr. Kapila and Professor Habib. There are two aspects to what you've said. Many of the concerns you have raised, may well be legitimate, but I still have a problem with the report that equates India with Pakistan. More than the loose sort of referencing of Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, because I think Rahul Gandhi could not have meant that literally. I'm hoping, but to compare us with a de facto military democracy is not something that I'm comfortable with. So in Mr. Gandhi's place, I would not have tweeted out the report of the Sweden-based group for that reason. While I do accept the larger point that there is a distinction between electoral democracy and institutional democracy. But Shruti, I think, I'll give Gurcharan a brief interjection of 30 seconds because Sushant had directly addressed him, and then to you, Shruti. Gurcharan, go ahead.
think that India is not Pakistan, and we don't want it to be like that. And so I think that Rahul Gandhi made a mistake. He by endorsing the Swedish report, he in fact was saying that, and that is patently. And I'm not just speaking as a nationalist. I'm trying to speak as a person. As I told you, I think the flaws of Indian democracy have been there. And this is what Sushant did not hear, what I was saying, that they have existed for 70 years. And those are the relationship of the citizen to the state is what defines a liberal or illiberal democracy. And we have a long way to go with that respect. And so, yes, and I did concede that, it's very interesting. You might want to know just that I was invited by the democracy movement at Arab Spring in Cairo at the time to, I had written this book, India Unbound, and they were interested to know what they could learn from India's experience as a democracy. And they wanted to know how we got our outsourcing business. They wanted to know why generals in India were not controlling the country, and how did we keep the generals out of our. And I said nobody in India has ever asked that question. But there is one area where we have weakened since 2014, and that is this feeling of insecurity amongst Muslims. I do believe.
So Gurcharan, I think you made a nuanced point, and that nuance is important to actually take hold of. That there was a mistake, Ajoy, in endorsing, and I know I saw that report on Rahul Gandhi's Twitter, endorsing a report that basically said that India is as autocratic as Pakistan, and we have those slides, we've quoted from it. But Gurcharan has disquiet about the place of minorities in India in the last in the last few years. Now, Sushant, just hold on. Let me just give the other two a chance to come in, and then I'll go around the panel again. Shruti, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to say. I mean, unlike Gurcharan Das, I'm a great believer in India's democracy, and I think it has had a major social impact on India. And I don't have a cynical view of it. So this is what academics call what he described as a patronage democracy. I think India's democracy has had a very profound social impact. If you look around you, the political elites look very different from the first generation of India's independence. But be that as it may, I wanted to say two things. We can feel a bit upset that the country has been compared with another neighbor, which has historically been militaristic. You can argue. Yeah, but you can argue that this is a kind of, there are flawed systems of comparison here, but it's a comparative indicator. It is not about perfection, as Sushant Sareen said, and it is telling us where we are comparatively in relation to other democracies. And the other aspect is that, yes, if you look at other indicators, so democracy is not simply about elections, as Rahul Gandhi said, but also I think development and freedom, as Amartya Sen himself pointed out, with the creation of human development indicators, is essential to democracy. And that is why year on year Bangladesh is beating us. So there is an erosion of entitlements, freedoms of all sorts at the institutional level, at the individual level. No one, I think, can make that case that India's democracy now is increasingly equated to very, very expensive elections.
May I ask a counter question?
And I think if we just think democracy is electoral, we are actually undoing a very hard-won freedoms in the last 70 years.
And that is a fair point to say there is a difference between electoral and institutional democracy. But I think there's also a certain amount of bristling that even self-reflective Indians, Shruti, feel about the Western world determining. Just let me ask a question.
Democracy is Western. I mean, the whole point is that this charge that this comes from the West. This is a new cringe. It has been weaponized anew. Some people, in our times. But where will you draw the line? I mean, the fact
I'm
is.
I'm just asking because to see.
I think this cringe is mistaken. You can either behave magnanimously and say they got it wrong, and just get on with it, or you should actually think, that the logical end of this argument is to say that actually democracy is not Indian. This is a Western construct. It comes from the Greeks, and we now need our own. That's exactly what Suhas Pashikar has argued in the Indian Express.
I saw Suhas's point, but my point to you, Shruti, would have been something very, very different. And that would have been that, it's the West still measuring the health of countries in other parts of the world. It's not we, for example, who are grading them on their press freedom or on their state of democracy. For example, questions could be raised about the United Kingdom and the racism in the monarchy, right? And we could have raised that in our parliament, and, we've been over that. So I think Western hypocrisy is something that gets under the skin of Indians, but we're losing track here. The larger point is, was Rahul Gandhi politically smart? And was Rahul Gandhi politically wise and sagacious in drawing these analogies? And I think Sushant has a valid political question here. Who is he addressing? Is he addressing a global audience? Is he addressing the Western audience? Is he addressing the domestic audience? There is some obviously, these are pictures of Rahul Gandhi electioneering, but in my opinion, he's actually not doing enough of this, and he's doing more. Ajoy, I know you've got your hand up, and let me just get Irfan in. He's doing more of these kind of conversations with the Ivy Leagues. Irfan Habib, go ahead.
Yeah, Barkha, I'm a little surprised each time we have a debate on Rahul Gandhi. And whenever he speaks, whether he speaks to academics like Ashutosh Varshney, whom I don't see as a court historian, no court academic. He has been a critical academic. He has been writing all sorts of critical things about the Congress Party, even about the UPA 1 and UPA 2. I've read so many of his pieces. So it's not that he's a family court historian at all, a court narrator at all. Second, Rahul Gandhi, as a leader of a political party, has all the business to talk to whosoever he likes to talk to. He has been in Tamil Nadu for days among people. He has talked to Brown University, and which he can. Anybody can actually. But the point is, if we think that he's such a useless, such a loser, why each and every tweet of his is noticed, and we have actually prime time programs on that. No, why not leave him alone? If he's a loser, if he belongs to a party which he can't resuscitate, so leave him alone. In this statement at Brown University, before Saddam and Gaddafi came in, whatever he said was absolutely fair points, which most of us are saying today.
Did you agree with the analogy to Saddam and Gaddafi?
No, did you agree? That analogy he would have avoided. It was not necessary. That was not necessary. It was avoidable. Unnecessary. It has taken people away from the main points he has raised. But he has raised lots of things which we are talking about all the time. Are people in the press, whosoever, very few actually are left in the media who actually speak about all these things. But whosoever is there, write about them every day. And Rahul Gandhi raised those issues again. As a political leader, the point is today, any opposition political leader, if he speaks, particularly Rahul Gandhi, if he speaks critically of what is happening in India, is taken as an offense. I don't know. Why is it so? We live in a democracy. There is a multi-party system.
Maybe because we all believe, Irfan, or we have started believing that we are a country without a national opposition or an effective national opposition. If I had to measure the health of a democracy, if I had to measure the health of a democracy, one key ingredient would be an effective national opposition.
Oh, if national opposition is run down every day, if national opposition leader speaks, even he tweets, we abuse him all the time. Now, what is the issue? How will you have an opposition party? No, I don't believe. It's very contradictory. Opposition has a space. Let them occupy that space.
Let me answer that.
You cannot put an opposition leader, whether Rahul Gandhi or anybody else. I'm not defending him. I have nothing to do with him or the Congress Party. The point is, if any of them speak today, in today's context of India, where you have a government with huge majority, and most of these people are actually in dumps, if they want to resuscitate themselves politically in a democratic setup, we need to welcome that. If you want opposition, good opposition.
Hang on. Sushant, you had a one-figure intervention and then a joy. Sushant, go ahead.
points. Number one, on what Mr. Das was saying, my question was not anything else. It was simply that these ratings, that suddenly India has become an illiberal democracy when all the things which Mr. Das said has existed for the last 70 years after independence. How come suddenly it's become illiberal? So that is, it leads me to question the bona fides of people who are making these kind of analysis, even the information on the basis of which they are making this kind of an analysis. That is point number one. Secondly, on this whole issue of Muslims feeling more insecure. Listen, Barkha, at the time when I think all of us are more or less contemporaries, maybe some younger than the others, but the fact of the matter remain, I remember that right from the 1970s, when I gained a degree of consciousness, every year, if not every second year, there used to be a major riot, a major pogrom, anti-Muslim pogrom in this country. I can name you all of them. At least 20 I can name you immediately. India was not an illiberal democracy then. Muslims were not insecure then. Suddenly they have become insecure. I am not denying social tensions. I am not denying anything else. But let's talk about discrimination. Let's talk about Sachar Commission report, okay? Because everybody loves quoting it all the time. Who is it an indictment of? Is it an indictment of the people who came into power after 2014? Or is it an indictment of all the governments who have been in this country since 1947? I want to have an answer on who it indicts.
Okay.
And the fact of the matter remains that suddenly, this has become a nice, convenient stick to beat up this government. That does not deviate from the fact that these people have done their own stupidities. And as the very famous Pakistani Punjabi poet says, कुछ शहर दे लोग भी जालिम सन, कुछ सानू मरन दा शौक भी सी. So इनको भी मरने का शौक है थोड़ा बहुत because of their motor mouths and all their other things. Yeah. The fact of the matter remains that this kind of nonsense has always happened. We need to fix it. Like I said, I would be the last person to say that India is a glowing democracy, everything is hunky-dory. It is not. But we need to fix it, and we need to fix it as we go forward. But to say that everything has gone bad, all institutions have been compromised, judiciary, for example, when has the judiciary not been under pressure in this country? Whenever an important political case would come up, the judiciary would be under pressure in this country. When has the administrative system...
Okay,
let's talk about the liberal government in Maharashtra, for example. Let's talk about, the three liberal parties, including Shiv Sena, which has now become the poster boy of liberalism. Let's talk about that party and the kind of stuff which has happened. Why are we not talking about this huge conspiracy of trying to browbeat, threaten, and intimidate the richest businessman?
We did a whole show on it. If you're talking about Sachin Vazi, we did a whole show on it just yesterday.
But listen, you are doing it. Why isn't everybody else doing it? The proverbial shit should have hit the fan on what has happened. And yet there is this conspiracy of silence.
Okay,
and I blame the central government for it. That they have also been trying to walk with, take very, very soft steps on this one.
Okay, lots of points.
An assistant police inspector is going to hatch such a conspiracy?
No, I think...
And that is the epitome of liberalism in that government?
No, and so there are serious
let's have some
questions of
corrosion. Here.
Yeah, no. So I think some words have become the old style idea of political secularism is definitely under question today after the Maharashtra alliance, also the alliance in Bengal with a very, very radical clerics and the left parties. But that still doesn't take away from the debate that we're having, Sushant. So often things don't cancel each other out. I think you can keep layering the conversation. And Ajoy, I want to bring you, you were wanting to make a point. And here's my kind of answer come question to you. And it is this. If Mr. Gandhi wants to change the fate of India, the direction it's moving in, the one very smart, effective way to do that is simply to win more elections. And when Irfan says, why do you care who he talks to? A number of people, whether they're Congress voters or not, care about this country having an opposition. And at the moment, it seems to many people that Mr. Gandhi is squandering away his time, very consciously having chosen to engage with global academia and then making all of these very broad, sweeping generalizations about his own country. How is this politically effective? If Mr. Gandhi has disquiet about the state of India's democracy, he needs to win more elections and change the course of that democracy, surely.
No, so Barkha, one of the tragedies is that whether it's all of us, that Sushant and everybody, and all of you are very well informed. Look at what happened in Goa. Look at what happened in Manipur. Look at what happened in Madhya Pradesh. It's not that you're not winning elections. You're buying elections and you still say you're not flawed 170. And every time something happens, hey, by the way, 70 years it has happened, so we are absolutely okay. 2014, let it continue, go down the road to perdition, and that's absolutely all right. I mean, that argument itself is specious. Second issue for Sushant's information. Why is it that the Transparency International found us going back? Why is it that the hunger index is finding us going back? Why is it that when the ease of doing business was such a, when we were doing well on that, we went bonkers and absolutely wild on India improving its ranking. And then when the foreigners say that, no, you're bad in democracy, we behave like a girl who's been, like a boy who's been jilted. I mean, why is
I'm glad you corrected that to boy. I'm glad you corrected that to jilted boy, by the way. Don't think I didn't notice.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, I noticed, and even I noticed it. So it was a fast.
Fair enough. Well corrected.
The issue is Transparency International, hunger index. Connect the dots, Sushantji. Connect the dots and see that all this leads to democracy finishing. Because
please answer my question. You've addressed your point to Sushant. Can you address my question?
One sec. Barkha, I'll just finish it with 2 seconds. I'm just saying that the democracy is when the voices of the people are not heard. And today in India, the poor are not being heard. The migrant laborers are not being heard. I'm not saying, oh, we did a great job in the past 70 years. We accept it. But the fact of today to walk away and say that, look, everybody is doing wrong, Transparency International is wrong, hunger index is wrong. Oh, by the way, Philip Kotler Award was great, Prime Minister got it. Clap, clap, clap. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, for Philip Kotler, everybody went, crazy on Twitter. And suddenly you go crazy, you go again crazy on the other side on V Dem report. It's sad. I mean, so I'm just saying that, and Rahul Gandhi.
My question still remains. Win elections, change the course of this country, devote your life to politics. Shruti is not agreeing. I'm putting it out there. Gurcharan, then Shruti, then Irfan again. Gurcharan, go ahead, please.
Well, I mean, I feel tremendously let down by Rahul Gandhi because he is not winning elections. We want an opposition. Congress used to be a fine party and it used to win elections. And now it is, I mean, we need a good opposition. And I think that, I mean, absolutely right what Sushant said, that he, instead of, addressing, I mean, it's all right to address Brown University. Nothing wrong with Brown. They're brown. I mean, after all, we are brown too. But frankly, win elections, and give us a robust opposition. And that's how we will become a stronger democracy.
Okay. Shruti, you were disagreeing with this argument that the counter is, if you want to change democracy, win elections. Why is that? Sorry, let me just unmute you and go ahead. Yeah.
I said because they are periodic, they happen every 5 years, and the work of a good democracy is actually what happens in those intervening years. Now, if everything is about an election machinery, which is my point, our focus in India's political institutions is just on that in itself is damaging other democratic institutions. Now, you say you won the elections, great. Then why is there no deliberation on any bills? Why doesn't the Winter Parliament sit? So it's not simply about the Supreme Court. It is also about the lack of deliberation, which is absolutely central, to say nothing of dissent and what is happening with dissent in this country. So I think those are serious issues. Now, on matters of electioneering and opposition, there is an issue that now it's very uneven. I mean, it's very uneven campaigning, just in terms of like sheer number that the kind of money you would need. The entry level for new political actors there's no level playing field, and this is something actually. The Congress, despite, and I'm not defending it at all, despite this very uneven thing, has managed to win provincial elections. And it does have the advantage that it still has a national party political structure, and it needs to galvanize that. It needs to kind of radicalize and, bring people out. But it's, and why Mr. Gandhi speaking to Brown University, I'm exactly with Irfan Habib. He can go and speak to whoever he wishes to. After all, Prime Minister Modi has gone on public rallies in Central Park in New York.
But, I think the point is it's election season, Shruti. It just seems a bit mistimed. Isn't it a bit
But there's a
mistimed?
constant election season in India. That's okay. It's not like he hasn't campaigned. There's a kind of every few months there is something is on. And why are we so fixated on campaigns is my question. Why isn't the dull work of government important? And let me just say that if you just measure on that, then the massive legislations that have taken place in India in the last 9 months cannot be argued that they are democratic or about equality. They're all discriminatory.
Okay, there are lots of different points in there. Irfan, quickly, and then I have to take last comments. And one of the paradoxes, Irfan, of course, and Gurcharan alluded to this, is the very nature. Ajoy, we're just going to get last comments. I saw your message, you need to leave. We'll just get a last word from you quickly. But Irfan, if you can just give a quick 30-second intervention on the fact that Mr. Gandhi himself possibly represents a non-democratic tradition. The Congress needs to democratize first before Mr. Gandhi can talk about the state of India's democracy. So Irfan and Ajoy, quick responses to that.
I can't hear.
Sorry, go ahead, Irfan.
Sorry, Irfan, can you hear me? And if you can't, let me give that to Ajoy first. Ajoy, go ahead. I'll ask Irfan after this since you have to go. Yeah, go ahead.
Look, Barkha, I say that I've heard lots of words being spoken on dynasty and other things, and also on democracy. And to be honest with you, the guy who's been most accused of being a dynast is the guy who's taking the maximum questions in this country. The guy who's being hounded and questioned and answering and continues to say that the press needs to speak up and protect you is the guy who's been accused of dynasty. And that is a tragedy, I guess. I mean, all of us should really think that, and the party which is claiming to be the world's largest party, etc., has never had a press conference for so many years, has never taken questions. And if you think that if Congress party has got lack of inner party democracy, then I would really like to know that the way the Pope gets elected, it's so secret. How the BJP president gets elected, again, it's a big secret, which we would love to see the lights on it, because the RSS decides who gets it. So there's an extra constitutional authority again. There.
I mean, I don't think it applies to the BJP anymore. Maybe at one point.
No,
but
we don't know how the BJP.
Now I think Mr. Modi is bigger than the party.
BJP president gets elected. None of us know it. He gets nominated. I mean, is there an election process?
Okay. Sorry, Ajoy, we just, you made your point. I know you have to go. We'll thank Ajoy there. I want to take last comments from everybody else. But Mr. Gandhi was actually asked at that interaction at Brown, would the Gandhis step aside? And this is what he said.
Given the crisis at hand, and we know that the last few years have not been great, would the Gandhi family be willing to step aside from their control of the Congress party and to let new leadership flourish?
Have you ever heard me say that the Congress party should not have elections? I've never said it. Right? And by the way, the next step, of course, is interesting, which is neither does the BJP have an election, neither does the BSP have an election, neither does any other political party have an election. But for some reason, which I agree with, because I believe that we have a bigger responsibility for some of the reasons that I outlined earlier, I believe that we should absolutely have elections and we should absolutely elect our leaders. But it's interesting to me that that's not something people expect of any other party. Nobody's ever said, I've never read in the newspaper, why is Mayawati ji not having elections? Never heard it. I've never heard that, why is the BJP not having an election? Why is there not an election in the RSS? I never heard it. It's fascinating to me. And the reason is clear. The reason is because people don't like the negotiation. The problem is the negotiation. They don't like this conversation that takes place in the Congress party. It's the only party in the country that has it. You simply cannot have the conversations that you have in the Congress party in any other political party. I've got example after example. I mean, have you asked yourself the question why you've never had a conversation like this with the Prime Minister?
All right. So a kind of combative answer there, and not frankly directly answering whether you'd step aside. Mr. Gandhi has neither taken over the party nor abandoned it, and that might be the conundrum there. But making the point that other parties, other politicians are not asked the same questions, everybody is much tougher, seems to be the suggestion there. Irfan, we'll start with you. We have to start winding up. We lost you in the middle. I'm very much hoping you can hear me. Go ahead with your last thoughts. Irfan, and you're on mute, sir. Irfan, can you hear me? You're on mute, sir. All right. If you can hear me, please unmute yourself. No. Shruti, let me bring you in. Shruti, go ahead.
I think the Congress is certainly in a crisis point. That can't be denied. As far as dynasty is concerned, I think one can't actually just singularize it with the Congress. It's now rife. More than a third of the parliament is dynastic, party political, but also the rest of, if you look at lawyers, film stars and the like, that is the nature of Indian society. In that sense, it's not unrepresentative. But I think the bigger challenge, and I dare say that's the reason he's talking to academics, the bigger challenge is an ideological idea, a political idea to counter the warfare, the complete capture of the Indian electorate through Hindu nationalism. And I think that's the true challenge. The challenge is not going to be winning elections till Mr. Gandhi and the Congress just don't come up with a kind of viable idea, narrative, it doesn't have to be just a simple secularism to hark back to Nehruvian socialism. They will have to produce a new political language, a new set of political ideas to counter.
But did you see that? Have you seen that? Any evidence of that so far?
I mean, the thing is, exactly my point is that the Congress is in a disarray, not simply in terms of leadership. It is in a disarray because it lacks an ideological coherence at this point.
Okay, Irfan, if you can hear me, your thoughts, please, before we lose you again. Irfan.
Yeah, actually, what I agree with what Shruti just said. Congress needs a new narrative. Of course, there is no doubt about it. As a political party, it has to do something, reinvent itself, etc. Besides looking for a leader which can lead the party, that is one major question. The point is, today, the sort of politics we are in, the sort of India we are in, we need to see that it is not actually the Congress party alone which has a problem. Look at the regional parties where Congress was dead much before it died at the center. It died in UP years ago. It died in Bihar decades ago. No, in all those states, and there are many other states as well. Other states, the political parties are almost not there, non-existent. So it's not just Congress which had to reinvent. These political parties have to reinvent, because Congress can't reinvent in these states. It has lost taste to
right. So I'm sorry, we're going to have to jump in. We don't have the greatest connection with you, so I'm so sorry. We're going to have to get you back next time on a better connection. But Sushant and then Gurcharan can wrap this up. Thanks, Irfan. Sushant, the point is, you've been talking about a centrist opposition, and the point being made by Ajoy and even by Rahul Gandhi, their answer is nobody gives them half a chance to be an opposition. Everybody's much tougher on them, more scathing about them. Perhaps you would concede that Mr. Gandhi has been made more fun of than any other politician in mainstream Indian politics.
Barkha, what do you expect that he will not be made fun of when he starts talking about the escape velocity of Jupiter, when he does all sorts of other these things? So clearly, if you make a meme of yourself, then you will be reduced to a meme. Number one. Number two, in politics and in Indian politics anywhere around the world, you really expect the opposition of any kind, whether in government or in opposition, to give any quarter to their political opponents. That does not mean enmity. That does not mean anything else. But you don't cede any political space, and you grab as much political space as you can. That is the first principle of politics. The Congress party used to practice it at one point of time. We are worried about the domination of the BJP in this day and age, but let's talk about from the 50s to the 80s almost, the domination of the Congress party. What was the opposition at that point of time? You had somebody like the BJP getting 2 seats in 1984. You had 405 or 6 seats for the Congress party in the entire house. You had a smattering of opposition in Western UP or some other places, and the biggest opposition leader at one point of time emerged from Andhra Pradesh, right? So the domination of the BJP today is not something which hasn't happened in the past, albeit it was on the other side of the fence. That's point number 2. Point number 3, you want to be a part-time politician, and you want to do the kind of stuff you do, and then you go in for campaigning for a couple of weeks, and then you go for a holiday for a couple of months, and then you come back and then you wonder where the hell your party is. Or you are a 24/7 politician like the guys in the BJP are. You look at an Amit Shah, you look at a Modi who's running a government, who's running a party. They are invested like 24/7 into politics. Can the Congress party say the same thing about
I think those are.
And finally, Barkha, one last point. This whole business of freedom to speak in the Congress party. Now, because the party is down and out, when the party was really strong, do you think anybody had the guts to say anything against the family? Even today, can anybody really say anything against the family? And I can tell you that privately, many top congressmen, and I'm not talking about the G23 right now, but others who come and lament about the state of the party, but they do not have the courage or the guts or the political capital to actually take on the family. So they have to kowtow, and many of them, I can't say some of those unparliamentary things on your show, but many of them have very unparliamentary things to say about the party leadership, and yet they have to clam up and usi tankha pe kaam karna padta hai in logon ko.
Okay.
So how do you get the revival of a party like this?
Gurcharan, I think the debate is sitting somewhere between those who believe that if Mr. Gandhi wants to change the course of India, he's got to learn to win elections, to people like Shruti and others who've argued that the electoral space is not necessarily a level playing ground anymore. And to Sushant's very interesting third point, that Indian politics and national politics in India has always gone through an era of one party maybe dominating. So there was the Congress era, and now you might well be in the BJP era, and the Congress is just going to have to accept that without drawing analogies to Pakistan and the Pakistani military, which, by the way, sort of offends me way more than Gaddafi and Saddam, because, they're dead and gone anyway. So, yeah, Gurcharan.
So I think Rahul Gandhi did hit the nail on the head at the Brown University when he talked about the elections within a party, intra-party democracy. Now, the culture of the Indian politics has been defined by the Congress because they've ruled most of the time in the last 70 years. And frankly, if the Congress had a tradition, a vital tradition of elections within the party, elections that were, and not the high command deciding everything, I think they would have sent a better signal than they have. And Rahul Gandhi, he moans about it, but he should now, now that he is still there in power, why doesn't he begin that by making the real election within the Congress party for the leader? The second point I just wanted to make is something that escapes us. I keep saying, let's look at the interaction between the citizen and the state on a day-to-day basis. And in one respect, I feel that we have made progress in freedom, because I have seen the situation with regard to how young new businesses that are starting up, how they are treated, etc. And the fact that India has climbed such a high, many ranks in the ease of doing business is partly due to the fact that everything is going online. And so the interface between the rishwat-seeking bureaucrat and the citizen supplicant is being broken. And so the reality, in fact, is that the reforms that Mr. Modi has discussed and done, whether it's agriculture, labor, in all areas, these will enhance actually the freedom to do business. And something we should not forget, because that too is democracy, economic democracy.
We'll have a separate program on the state of the economy and the well-being of the economic democracy, but we'll have to leave it there. Sushant, Gurcharan, Irfan, Shruti, and before that to Ajoy. Thank you. Thank you to our audience. See you tomorrow at same time, same place with another big story of the day and our in-depth analysis of it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.